So my name is Walter Ostrenga, O-S-T-R-E-N-G-A. I'm the police chief with the city of Monona. So we put this out at 3:50 this morning that on Wednesday, September 6th at approximately 5 p.m., the City of Madison Police Department responded to a home in the 5600 block of Tecumseh Avenue in the city of Monona in an attempt to arrest a 42-year-old Edward Matthews. Matthews is a person of interest in a shooting on Madison's east side and was believed to be the only occupant inside the residence. Police say a woman was shot multiple times on Retke Avenue on August 30th, and that was how he was involved in that, they believe. When contacted, Matthews refused to exit the home. The Dane County Sheriff's Office assisted with a tactical team at the scene. Around 12:40 a.m., the tactical team attempted to make entry into the home. Shortly thereafter, a fire was observed inside the residence. The Monona Fire Department responded and assisted with controlling the fire from spreading. At approximately 1:17 a.m., Matthews was seen holding a gun and threatened to shoot officers. Matthews finally surrendered at approximately 2 a.m. and was taken into custody without further issue. Monona Fire remained on scene to finish putting out the structure fire. At the time I put this out, Tecumseh had been closed, but it is now open. Also present here today is Madison Police Chief Mike Koval and Dane County Sheriff Dave Mahoney. They're going to provide information on the respective departments' involvement in the situation. UW Police Chief Kristen Roman is also here because she has provided assets to help in the investigation also. But before I turn the podium over to them, I'd just like to say thank you to the residents of Tecumseh, Belle Isle, and Birchhaven Circle neighborhoods for being so patient and understanding during this critical event. It seems more and more we're seeing reports of homicides, shots fired, and other gun-related events in the news. These events are not just within the boundaries of large cities, as crime has no boundaries, but they're capable of occurring anywhere at any time. In this particular case, the resident of 5606 Tecumseh made an extremely poor choice of allowing this wanted, armed subject to seek shelter in his residence. Unfortunately, Fire Chief Scott Sullivan was scheduled to leave town for a few days and cannot be present. We do have some representatives from Monona Fire Department, Captain Bob Miller and Lieutenant Rick Hammond, and they're going to come up here in a minute. But I'll just finish up my part of this. Chief Sullivan was present last night and this morning in the command post, which was located in this conference room. It was key that he was present in this room to direct firefighters as the event evolved. Also present were firefighters from the village of McFarland, the town of Madison, and paramedics from the city of Madison. As this event progressed, the structure fire started. So I'll let the chief and the sheriff talk about that aspect of the investigation. But I want to thank each and every firefighter that was present, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, Bob, but that's not what they signed up for, an active shooter event. They all displayed great courage and professionalism in their response, and their actions absolutely saved the houses in close proximity from also being engulfed in flames. And finally, I want to thank the City of Madison Police Department and Dane County Sheriff's Office for how they reacted to this critical situation. The times have changed quite a bit from when I was a SWAT officer early in my career, very early in my career, and continue to change in the last few years with training in professional communication and de-escalation. In this particular case, we were very fortunate that no innocent person, no police officer, no deputy, no firefighter came to any physical harm, and I say physical harm. In the end, the suspect was apprehended without law enforcement personnel having to take his life. So with that, I'm going to introduce Bob Miller and Lieutenant Rick Hammond. Bob's a captain with our fire department.
Hello, everybody. We haven't had much sleep, exactly none. I wanted to thank the great efforts of the Madison Police Department, Dane County Sheriff's Department, the SWAT teams, the bomb team, and Madison Med 5 was on the scene for a while. It was a long, drawn-out affair. I live 3 houses from the affected house, and I know the neighbors have talked to me about how happy they are that it came to a good solution. And on behalf of the firefighters, I really want to thank the police department. Early on, before the chief was up here, I was in the command center. Great people to work with. When the fire broke out, I went down and became operations. Worked closely with the SWAT team. They had us under their wing. We worked right next to their vehicle. They shielded us. It was very stressful because the house was very involved at the time. We were concerned about the neighboring houses and also with this individual that was in and out of the house, and the possibility of people being shot. I couldn't say more about the police services and how they protected the fire department. And on behalf of the community, thank you.
Chief Colwell?
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Chief Ostringa, and your fire department for stabilizing that scene and making it less of an incident than it could have otherwise morphed into. So we're very beholden to you guys and the perimeter and to the firefighting efforts that saved other homes. Thank you very much. I think that bears speaking right at the outset that the reason that this whole Donnybrook even got launched, lest anybody forget, was August 30th. That's when this fire really began. On August 30th, when you had a 37-year-old woman who was shot 10 times on Rethke Avenue, that should be some indicia of the level of culpability, the level of desperation, and the level of seriousness and recklessness that the individual, Matthews, was capable of. So at the point in which we originally had probable cause to effect the arrest of Matthews, he became, as one would hope, a priority because of his ongoing danger to this community. He has a checkered history with armed gun violence, and certainly when you show the capacity to shoot someone 10 times and leave them for dead, that is someone who obviously has no boundaries and will go to any lengths to avoid being apprehended. So suffice to say is that when we got credible information of where he could be located, we got eyes on it through our Dane County Narcotics Task Force, which is obviously a metro unit comprised of individuals from several agencies, as well as our VCU, our Violent Crimes Unit. Surveillance was established. It was established that, in fact, when a person came out of that home, the residence, we can confirm the identity of the person that was there and that he was alone, and he was obviously then alone and perhaps, as is his MO, going to have access to weapons, which proved to be correct. We took on the initial legs of trying to get a loose team together. We have always some on-duty SWAT personnel along with VCU detectives and other officers who have tactical specialized training, who initially set up a perimeter and attempt to engage the subject through dialogue. As any of us here who's ever been spending any time with the SWAT team, the tactical guys would more than prefer that if we could establish a dialogue, negotiations, that puts no one in harm's way, and true to form, that's exactly what we attempted to do. Did not answer the landline, at which point we deployed our Armored Rescue Vehicle, or ARV is our acronym, and ultimately put it in a position whereby we could get close enough to try to use a dialogue through a PA system. Again, that did not yield any positive results, although over a protracted period of time, it soon came to realize that we could see movement therein. And since we'd had the homeowner with us previously, there was no reason to believe that this was anything more than himself as now a barricaded person. Our shifts had begun quite earlier in the day. We were working into the 12th, the 13th, the 14th hour, and because this is a suburban community outside of Madison, and owing to the fact that typically oftentimes the county's tactical response team is oftentimes very well trained, always going to be deployed in a lot of these instances that are outside of the city of Madison. We both do a lot of collaboration with each other, but they had been relatively fresher. They had been out on an earlier call, as I'm sure the sheriff will allude to. And so the decision was made that we would relinquish the perimeter that we had and acquiesce and only support the machinations of what the TRT for Dane County wanted to do at their request, and because we felt the need, because we were the ones that had zeroed in on this suspect, and we were the ones that wanted to follow up on him in the event of his arrest. We left some units behind, particularly a sergeant and a couple of uniformed officers from our SWAT team, only insofar as to be of any help we could to their TRT because of the ARV. I know they have a Bearcat, but it was also decided tactically it would be better to have more of those vehicles in the event that we're going to continue to try to create a dialogue or an extraction or whatever the case may be. So at that juncture, about 8:45, almost 9, is when we began the transition, and so perhaps this would be the best time for you to take it from here, Sheriff.
Well, thank you, Mike. And both Chief Ostrenga and Chief Koval touched briefly on the collaboration between these agencies. This incident highlights the collaborative professionalism, the training, and the expertise that this community, not only the city of Monona, but Dane County as a whole, enjoys. And it highlights the dedication, commitment, and professional excellence of our police officers, our deputy sheriffs, who work every day, who train together for an incident much like this. I also want to commend the firefighters from the city of Monona. We don't traditionally work closely on incidents like this critical incident. Certainly, we don't train together for response to shots fired incidents. But the citizens of the city of Monona should be extremely proud by which their firefighters responded last night to not only protect the surrounding homes, but to attempt to put the fire out and save the life of this individual wanted by the city of Madison. Because at the end of the day, our job was to take this subject into custody as safely as possible. So all officers working last night, Madison, Dane County Sheriff, Monona, did so, and all should be proud, our citizens should be proud, that at the end of the day, they did their job and they saved even the life of this defendant. As Mike mentioned, the tactical response team from the sheriff's office was summoned because it is our responsibility to respond to those communities outside the city of Madison and to provide that extra level of expertise and high level of training. Last night could have had a very different ending, not for the professional excellence shown by the men and women of the Dane County Sheriff's Office. Our tactical response team, on multiple occasions while engaged in dialogue, were met with gunfire. But through their training, their restraint, through their de-escalation, did not have to take a life. However, multiple justified opportunities existed when shots were fired, when it was very clear during our negotiations that this individual was not going to voluntarily surrender himself, and when coming into confrontation with deputies, displayed a firearm, displayed deadly force on his own part, was met with de-escalation and less than lethal weapons. Beanbags, OC, and at the end of the day, collaboratively, we were able to serve the citizens of the city of Monona by taking this subject off the street, but doing it safely. Now begins the investigation. As a result of the fire, the State Fire Marshal's office will be investigating the fire, and because there were shots fired by deputies on the tactical response team, we've asked for an outside investigation, and that investigation will be conducted by the UW Police Department, the Sun Prairie Police Department, and the Middleton Police Department. And so as that investigation unfolds, more information will become available further down the road. But at this point, I want to turn this back over to Chief Ostrenga and provide the opportunity for any questions that you may have.
Okay, are there questions for the sheriff or the chief, the firefighters, myself?
Chief, I don't know who would address this, but this was published by Channel 3000 3-4 hours ago, and I'll read verbatim. A Monona home in the 5600 block of Tecumseh Avenue was set on fire by a person of interest Thursday morning. Is that how the fire started?
Well, as
Whoever wants to address it at the microphone.
Sure.
You can come on up here, I'll hide behind you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Virgil. I am a director with the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation. I'm also the state fire marshal. And currently, unfortunately, we're just not in a position to answer those questions. We will be responsible for conducting the investigation regarding the fire that occurred at the residence. But at this juncture, I think it's just a little bit too soon for us to attempt to confirm how the fire actually occurred or got started.
We do have video of it, what looks to be a tracer going in the window, the same window where the smoke started coming out and the first flames came out. Is it possible that a tracer could start the fire in that way?
Again, I don't want to be premature in my comments. We're very early in the investigation, as the sheriff has described to you, and as we conduct the investigation and are able to identify some more factual information, we'll be in a better position, I think, to give some updated information on that. So.
As part of our operation last evening, there were non-incendiary OC canisters shot into the residence in an attempt to force the subject to exit the residence voluntarily. But those are non-incendiary, and they are used only to disperse high-volume pepper spray.
So, Sheriff, there was nothing fire-related or combustible that was used by your personnel that had any potential to start a fire? Is that what you're saying?
As I just said, it was non-incendiary, meaning non-fire-related.
Chief, a question for you. You had mentioned the August 30th wounding of a woman in Madison, but court records show that your officers did encounter this suspect the day later. I wonder if you could detail that for us at all. This is a criminal complaint that was issued today against Edward Matthews, and the complaint references a previous encounter between Madison police officers and Edward Matthews on East Washington Avenue on August 31st. Can you tell us anything about that encounter?
I think what that's referring to is the proximity as we were responding into the area of the crime scene where the woman was shot critically. I think that there was right around 11:30 to midnight, which would made it the next morning. We're talking about proxemics of people coming, people going, and I think what it became aware of is that there may have been a chance encounter where there was a sort of an epiphany, an actualization, that perhaps this person seen fleeing may have had a relationship or an association to the recently completed crime scene. So I think that's what that's in reference to. That he was seen leaving the scene.
Okay, he simply escaped from officers then?
Well, escaped, I don't know if it was tacitly known or understood per se that there was probable cause to link him as the shooter, because at that point we had no witnesses to the shooter.
Chief, do you know what the relationship is between the shooter and the woman who was injured?
I would call it sort of an on-again, off-again sort of checkered domestic history.
Was the homeowner the one who that tipped you off, and the homeowner was out with you during this whole incident?
I can tell you we've got confidential sources that originated our surveillance, but it was not originating from the homeowner themselves, no.
Chief Ostrenga, you were mentioning the residents, the actual residents of this home, and perhaps a misguided decision with regard to Matthews. Can you explain that? Did they know they were harboring a wanted man, but potentially wanted for attempted homicide?
No, I don't know that for a fact.
Well, what did
But
they
this
know-
this
what
person
did they know about
this
that
person
man?
this person Matthews is not a resident of that location, but apparently someone dropped him off there, and this resident decided to give him shelter. That's why I said it was like a poor decision on his part.
Is that person facing charges?
That would be part of the investigation, and I don't have that information. I think we'll have to just wait and see how this evolves.
It says that Matthews was seen holding a gun and threatened to shoot officers. Did he point it at officers, or did he actually fire any shots?
There were several incidents where he fired shots throughout the evening when interacting with the tactical response team from the sheriff's office. And I think this really highlights, the professional excellence, the training, and the restraint that were shown by these members of this team, which in 38 years with the sheriff's office, as a former tactical team member, myself, the past 11 years as sheriff, I couldn't be prouder by how they performed their duties last night.
Dave, you said that they had opportunities to engage or to fire back.
Well, they were met with deadly force.
Right. So
When this subject exited the residence armed and fired a firearm, they could have had that opportunity, but they used great restraint because their intent was to take him into custody with the least level of force. I know that he was hit with beanbag rounds, which is non-lethal, which were not able to, did not operate exactly as they should have. But in the end, as a result of the fire, he came out of the residence and was taken into custody. And quite honestly, amongst the three of us, that's what's most important, was we were able to take him into custody, remove him as a threat from the community, and now hold him accountable for his actions.
No officer from Dane County Sheriff's Office fired their gun?
Yeah, we did have one deputy who fired rounds. The individual was not struck by those rounds.
Was that when he was fleeing at the time?
No, he had, I believe he was outside, or in close proximity to outside and posed that threat.
I just wanted to add, I think the sheriff was, when talking about less lethal, just for the benefit of our listening audience, besides the deployment of the OC, the pepper mace that he described, as well as bean bags, we also had occasion to deploy 40 millimeter projectiles, which are also less lethal, but I just wanted to make sure we covered the gauntlet with that and didn't leave anything out.
Can you talk a little bit more about how he surrendered?
Well, I think at the end, when this home became fully engulfed, he was overcome
By
smoke and crawled out of the garage and was taken into custody.
Did he have a gun at that point?
I don't believe that he did.
A gun was located in proximity to where he was last eyeballed before he came out, so that gun remained in place as part of an evidentiary. Everything has to be photographed, warrant, and then we go through the painstaking things of us looking for evidence of an attempted homicide, the state fire marshal looking at what was the cause or the origin of the blaze, so forth. So search warrants are still being negotiated for that property, and I do know that there was a gun found at the scene, but it was, since it was not obviously accessible to the suspect, it was left in place where it lied.
Sheriff, did the fire prompt your tactical personnel to make the decision that we have to now advance?
Well, at one point we advanced and broke a window to try to further negotiations with this individual, and it was once the window was broke that we found that the residence was on fire and backed away. Continued the dialogue, summoned additional resources, particularly the firefighters, who again, I just cannot say enough about their level of bravery and professionalism to enter a hot zone like this where shots had been fired by the defendant and to do their job protecting the citizens of Monona. protect the residences, both residences on both sides, and to de-escalate themselves the fire of this particular residence, which I think was a contributing factor in saving the life of Mr. Matthews.
Did he suffer any smoke inhalation problems or
Yes.
other injuries?
Yes. He was transported to a local hospital and was currently is still being treated.
The house had been on fire for several minutes before fire went down there. Can you just talk about the decision, how that balancing act of, when is it safe to send the truck down the road while it's becoming engulfed, fire starts coming through the roof? You have to think about neighbors, houses. Can you just talk about that balancing act?
Well, that's the collaboration between the two agencies. In this case, the tactical response team needing fire suppression support and providing the protective measures for the firefighters to do their job. And this really highlights how a level of training comes to benefit the community.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Fire Chief Sullivan was present in the command post, and he was working directly with the tactical commanders. So they were constantly going back and forth, start the water, stop the water, start the water, stop the water. They worked really closely together, and if it wasn't for that, that they were being protected by the deputies, and the firefighters were also protecting the deputies on the scene from further fire injuries.
If I'm not mistaken, Matthews did not engage in conversation with anybody from Madison Police, but then he did later with your tactical team. Is that correct, Dave?
He definitely did not engage our attempts. We had crisis negotiators there who were using the PA, and he did not respond, although over time we could see there was someone in the house because of the movement. We were close enough. And I was just going to say, I wonder if my firefighter friends can vouch for the fact that it's a lot nicer to be behind a big ARV when you're trying to fight a fire than to stand right next to it, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. That's just for my Madison audience. Thank you. Thank you, firefighters.
The SWAT team was fantastic in keeping us informed. A couple of times they told us to get down. We were right down on the cement on our bellies, shut the water off, told us, okay, you might be round back. They informed us. The rest of the SWAT team was on the other side of your truck, and that's why we couldn't get to the other side of the house. So we were trying to fight it from the AB side, and we're limited to that. It was a stressful situation.
Gentlemen, of all your years in law enforcement, can you recall another occasion where part of your mission was protecting firefighters from a potential active shooter, something like this?
Simpson Street.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, we had an instance down on Simpson Street where the guy was basically arguably filled with had a bomb pack on and had a gun and was shooting at people. And so there was an instance where it was a mutual aid sort of necessity to keep each other back covered.
And actually it happens during critical incidents all the time, whether it be paramedics or firefighters, to ensure law enforcement working with firefighters to ensure their safety, while the firefighters, in this case, and many others, when fire is involved, to protect those law enforcement officers who have to maintain a position to ensure the safety of others.
Getting back, I'm just trying to develop a little bit of a timeline here. Did he start talking to people from your tactical team? Or?
We had been there for some time. We had lights on. We were trying to engage conversation. And after a period of time had gone by with no response, we broke a window and immediately received a response. That response I can't share on public television.
I will also say, sort of, because I think sometimes the public wonders what's the use of all the training and all the quasi-militaristic thing. Did you not, at one point, able to get a better look-see inside what was going on because of your robot?
Well, we also had the resources of our bomb squad on premises who deployed a robot, but the robot did not function as designed and was not able to approach the house.
What time did you fire the OC canisters into the house?
I don't know.
mean,
I don't have my notes in front of me, so I don't know exactly, but
But that was the only, his comment to you when you broke the window was the only time you actually heard anybody in the house speak?
no, when he was outside, he made brief conversation with a number of the tactical officers. He asked for them to shoot him. And again, with their restraint, they realized that they were going to make ground with de-escalation. And as a result of their restraint, he's off the street and will be held accountable for his actions.
That's a long tactical situation. What was it like for all of your guys as officers to be in that stressful situation for so long?
I mean, an adrenaline dump can only sustain you for so long, and then you get edgy and things of that nature. That's what it's important to have an incident command post off-site who can sort of make sure that we're checking those realities, getting relief, pulling people off posts if they've been too long in a perimeter post, getting fresh eyes in, making sure that their creature comforts are taken as best they can without leaving those posts. But clearly, when you have someone as mercurial, as volatile as Matthews was in this instance. It looked at times like it was going to be suicide by cop. He claimed he wouldn't be taken. He is literally presenting all of those elements which would suggest a legal, defensible, deadly force application. When you are coming that close on trigger, on site to someone who you might have to take their life, I guarantee you that wreaks havoc within.
And it's also important that we have supervisors on the scene who are assessing each of these members, and we did. And they acted as they needed to relieve people, provide creature comforts, as Mike mentioned. Again, I don't think any one of us could be more proud of the performance of our staff last night.
I looked at my my phone. It was at 12:42 when they tried to to breach into the house, and he was taken into custody at around 2 o'clock. So you had an hour and 18 minutes of just crazy activity, and you can't compliment the officers on their perimeter enough for having the restraint not to use deadly force and to try to take this guy alive, which they did.
One of my officers sustained a cut in handcuffing the subject, who had himself a lot of blood on him, so we were evaluating for a significant exposure. So when I spoke to him at 4 in the morning at an ER, he said, "Chief, it was absolutely," the words he used was surreal. I can't even begin to describe it.
How was he able to survive being in a house so engulfed? Was he hiding in the back corner? Like, when you guys went and got him, that house was fully engulfed, it seemed to me.
Well, he came out, and I'm sure that as part of the investigation, they'll interview him when he's capable of being interviewed, and hopefully we'll gain that information.
I was present when they were doing this breach and listening to the radio traffic, and it was like a game of cat and mouse. He would pop out one door, go to the back, the firefighters would move to the front, he'd come around to the front, then they'd move the firefighters to the back. So they're constantly trying to keep this fire under control, and in the meantime, he keeps coming out, going back in, and then eventually I think he opened the garage door, maybe because there was so much smoke and he was being overcome by smoke. But I don't know.
And Chief, just one more timeline question, and you had mentioned a portion of the timeline. When was it when the window was broken and law enforcement became aware of the fire?
I was told 12:42 was when they started the breach. That's what my lieutenant had told me.
So that's when the...
That's when
the
I
window
believe
was broken?
I believe that's when they tried to force entry into the house.
And
Now,
discovered the
I
fire?
don't know exactly what was broken, but that's when they decided they were going to try to force entry into the house.
And they discovered the fire at that point, when they...
I don't think the fire was there immediately. It just, over a period of time, it started to evolve. It was after, I believe it was after the OC was deployed, though.
So
We had spent several hours trying to get some reaction from him. whether it be lights on the residence, loud sounds, and without any reaction. We didn't know whether he had harmed himself. And so we attempted to break the window to generate some response. And we got that response in language that I can't share with you. So then we backed away and continued, the conversations. He came out, as the chiefs have both said, on a number of occasions. When he went back in, we deployed OC in an attempt to force him out of the residence. And as we then approached the residence, that's when we discovered the fire and backed away.
So he would come out, so he'd actually show himself?
Yes.